listeners from near and far. Welcome to another episode of The Crossroads with your host, Rashida Green. Let's start the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Crossroads. I am your host, Rashida Green. And today I am joined by a very, very, very special guest, Dr. Velma Deleveaux. I'm going to let her introduce herself, but I want you all to know that she is a PhD. She is an entrepreneur. She is all of the things, and she's going to talk to us today about STEM. But before we get there, we're going to give some flowers. Dr. Deleveaux, would you like to go first?
Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity. And thank you for what you're doing, Rashida. It's really important. Your work is very important. I'd like to give flowers to a mentor who just passed last year. His name is Dr. Irving Winters. He was the first Black man to get an engineering degree from Yale. He went on to get his PhD in industrial engineering at UMass. And the reason why he's so important is because he had an impact on not just my life, but so many young engineers. The way he encouraged us, he was a manager at Digital Equipment Corporation and really supported our careers, our ideas, our imagination. He encouraged me to go to Harvard and get a master's degree. He mentored me, was an advocate, and even as he was getting older in life, he mentored and taught physics in the neighborhood in Annapolis until he was not able to anymore. I think he was like 85 when he stopped. So he died at 93, and he was focused on just making a difference in everyone's life. And that's what's so important. I think that's part of what I am inspired by him and other people. They may not be really famous, and you don't need to be, but I think all of us have a purpose, and we need to really live that, know what it is, and kind of live that out. So I give my flowers to him.
Yeah. That's awesome. And that is such an impact and such an important thing that you said, that you don't always have to be famous to have an impact in people's lives. And I actually have a few people that I want to give some flowers to, one of whom I've given them to in the past, but we're going to do it again. So the first person is Dorothy Lavinia Brown, who was the first African-American woman to be a surgeon. And next is Mary Jackson. And she was the first engineer at NASA. She helped a lot of other Black women and people of color get jobs at NASA as well. Of course, most people know her from Hidden Figures. Yep. And last but not least is Dr. Gladys West. And I have given her flowers, as I've said before, but she is basically the person who brought us the GPS. All the framework for that was all from her. So want to give some flowers to those amazing women. And it marries very nicely into our discussion. So I'm pumped because not only are you an accomplished person in your own right, but you have a passion for STEM. So can you tell us about who you are and your origin story?
Yes, absolutely. I am from Crooked Island, Bahamas. I'm not sure most people have heard of Crooked Island, but the population is about 250 people. It is a beautiful and pristine place. We only have 2 flights a week. I still travel back to the Bahamas every chance I get. Most people have heard of Nassau or Freeport, and those are more heavily populated places. But and my island is considered part of the out island chains that is pretty remote. My journey from Crooked Island, I would say, to corporate America includes, I think, some key things that are important to know. Even though my parents were not formally educated, they really had an appreciation for the value of education. And so I'm an immigrant. We came to the United States, and part of the reason why we came to the United States was because my father saw opportunity. My parents had a vision that their children would go further than they were able to go because they were, didn't have money to pursue formal education, to get a bachelor's degree. And so they worked pretty hard. I am one of 6 children, very close to my siblings. That was a really important value that our parents taught us to make sure that you value your community and the people around you and to pour into their lives. I was always a child. My mother would say she gave birth to me on her birthday by herself. There was one midwife on the island, and she was pretty busy with 2 other births. And so she always talks about how I was ready to go and how I always had a active imagination. My sister, my oldest sister, will tell you that I was a pretty annoying child. I was very curious and asked a lot of questions. And one of the things I would say later on, as we talk about what our parents' role in inspiring their children and helping them, is I think we need to encourage curiosity and encourage people to dream. And so I think that was a really important factor, that no one said there was anything I couldn't do. My parents always believed and taught their children they could do anything they wanted to do. And so I think that's really important. My academic career encompassed me completing a bachelor's in industrial engineering at Georgia Institute of Technology, a master's in engineering science at Harvard, and a PhD in industrial and manufacturing engineering at Penn State. And then I went on to be a professor at Penn State, also taught at University of Pennsylvania, and also locally at Morgan State University. And I do have a love for teaching and for giving back. I also believe in mentoring women who are women entrepreneurs and people that look like me, because I think we should be paying it forward just the way my mentor did and the way my parents did for me. And so I also spend time and partner with local middle school and high schools to encourage STEM participation and to sometimes judge in contests, et cetera, and work with the administrator. So I think that's really important. And I think lastly, I would say the one thing that I love that my parents was wise enough to do was my father would encourage us to explore the world. And so even though he was in the United States preparing for his family to come and live and pursue education, he would strategically, from all his travels, come back and give us pictures, show us pictures of the world, and encourage us to see ourselves there. And even when we moved to the United States to a really small town, he would just pack up the 6 kids and my mother, and we would travel to large cities. And he just wanted to spark our imagination and to encourage us to see ourselves beyond the communities where we live. And I think this is really important, that our children see themselves conquering the types of issues that we're facing in our communities.
Yes. And kind of segueing into STEM. So for those that do not know, what does STEM stand for? I think people hear it a lot and they may not know what the acronym stands for. And also, what is the impact that STEM has had on your life and the trajectory of your career?
So STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math, and it encompasses a number of careers, the physical sciences, environmental science, math, engineering, all of the engineering, computing, and also the medical fields. And so STEM is really important because the average STEM worker makes more than a typical worker. In fact, I think if you look at studies from the Pew Research and other places, STEM jobs, I think in 2021, the average starting engineering job was about $90,000, right? Compared to other jobs on average around half of that amount. And so these jobs really pay well. And what's important is that these jobs are jobs that are going to outpace a lot of other opportunities in the future. So the STEM needs and requirements for employment are continue to grow. They pay well. And I think most importantly to me, the STEM jobs, there's an intersection between STEM work and also some of the challenges we have in Black and Brown and poor communities. And I think for us, it represents an opportunity right now. We have greater awareness of creating the next Black Wall Street. And so we see a groundswell of interest, support, funding for African-American businesses. The STEM fields for me create an excellent background, not just to work in STEM, but to also lead businesses in STEM, right? I mean, we have local examples with Volt Utility, this company that is actually led by an African-American, right? And so it's really the confluence of the types of issues we're facing in environmental justice and our need for STEM. I think that we've got some more work to do to get more people like yourself who are activists, more people into policy, and then more people looking at STEM, entering into the STEM fields in order to actively solve some of our challenges. I want to, for purposes of us sort of getting an understanding when I talk about the challenges in our community, I want to quote from a 2016 report. It was actually called a Communities of Color and Environmental Justice. And it's called 5 Things You Should Know. And I know we have some of the links in the chat, and that's one of the links that I think we can include in addition to the ones that we have here.
Absolutely.
And so these are the 5 things. 1, communities of color have higher exposure rates to air pollution than their white non-Hispanic counterparts. Number 2, landfills, hazardous waste sites, and other industrial facilities are most often located in communities of color. Number 3, lead poisoning disproportionately affects children of color. Number 4, climate change disproportionately affects low-income communities and communities of color. And lastly, water contamination plagues low-income areas and communities of color across the nation. So these are the problems that we're facing. And so we need solutions in a number of areas, like clean water. If you've heard anything or you Google and read it, it's really a problem, especially for not only areas around the world, but also in our local communities. And so we need solutions around water filtration systems, et cetera, right? And so climate change is driving a lot of these issues as well. We need people who are focused on climate change solutions. We need folks to figure out, now that we've got an upswing in interest in solar technology, constructing solar ovens for remote places where people don't have power. Many of us are aware of food deserts, the fact that we, people of color, have less access to fresh fruits and vegetables in our communities than other communities, right?
Yep.
And even in Fort Washington, I'm not sure if that has changed, but at least 5 to 10 years ago, there was only one grocery store, even though that's a very large, affluent community. You would have expected there to be more access to fruits and vegetables. So there are projects that some of us can point to in Philadelphia that has gotten a lot of attention around creating our own solutions. And so that's one of the things I really think we need to focus on is driving the next generation, the current generation, to understand and solve issues that are personal to us and to our communities, and also, just the broader society. The other thing that I think we need to focus on is getting more people into the medical professionals, right? So
yes,
that if most of us know that we've got our health disparities in Black, Brown, and poor communities is a significant problem. We have higher risk for heart disease, strokes, cancer, asthma, influenza, pneumonia, diabetes, and AIDS. And we've all seen the devastating impact of COVID-19 to our communities. And so we're always disproportionately being impacted. So I think it's important for us to understand that if we've learned anything over the last 10 years, and just throughout history, it's really our contributions that we can control and we can have an impact. And so we really need to make sure that there's a heightened awareness and activity around getting our next generation into these fields and to be driving solutions.
And you have already kind of taken us to the crossroads, and it's because there's all these different intersections that are being brought up. And something else that I want to bring it back to is in terms of STEM is that, women unfortunately make up to like 28% of the STEM workforce. And of that, women of color, it's 5%. And we all know that having access or even being aware of these jobs and the availability of these jobs really starts at a younger age. It starts, by the time you get to college, hopefully, you're going to job fairs or they're having those kinds of things. When I was in college, they had that, but it really, if you even want to get to that point, you really have to have those things fundamentally as children. And so from your experience and your insight, why is it that more children of color, Black children, are not being exposed to STEM at an early age?
So I think sometimes it's about the schools that we have access to. So much in life, my success and a lot of people who are successful generally is because they've had exposure. I mean, if you think about my father and mother who were uneducated, but they understood the value of exposure. And so my father systematically bringing back pictures of the world was to expose me to there's more out here for you, right? So I think that that's a challenge. But you don't have to be rich or have a lot of resources to inspire your children and to provide resources. Now, because of technology, we have access to a lot of information and things that we can do. So I want to say that I want to dispel a myth where parents sometimes believe, and statistically, they've done studies to show that a lot of parents they feel intimidated by STEM. And so they don't enter into that world because they don't feel prepared to have a discussion around STEM. And so I would say you do not have to be STEM savvy or have the education of a STEM teacher or understand how to do algebra. I mean, that was a joke in one of Medea's films. Remember Family Reunion, where, I mean,
I'm one of them type bougie Blacks that just can't do too much Medea in my diet. Okay.
For those of us who watched some of the Medea films, it represented a key point, which was, I don't understand this new algebra that you're doing, but I can work to find somebody who does. And that was what my parents' approach was, is you know what, if that's important, we're going to make it happen. So the good thing is I think you and I are going to provide a couple of links in the chat where parents can actually get some information and learn how to participate and support their children without having to become STEM professionals. And so there's one link that we're going to include in the chat that really talks about createlearn.us. And it has online virtual labs that kids can go to. It has virtual field trips to a recycling center and to landfills. And that's really important because that's that intersection with environmental justice, so people can understand, where are these landfills again? They're in our communities. What are we doing about them? We need people to enter into fields and become environmental scientists and technicians and all sorts of areas that are related to help address this problem. But you can get an understanding of this problem, what they look like, what the challenges are, by just going virtually, right?
Yeah.
You can also explore, if people are interested in space, right? The surface of Mars using 3D, how it's done. The Museum of Science actually has a wonderful program where they bring the museum virtually to you. And all of this is in this link that we're sending to folks, right? NASA has a flight simulator for use on a laptop. And the Natural Museum of History in DC, for those of us who are living in this area, is a wonderful place to go
It
and
is.
experience it. So you can go to the museums in your local area and go with your kids, because that becomes a learning experience for you as well. And so it ends up being something that you share, and in that you're sort of entering into the STEM arena and answering some of your own questions about, why and how it happens. And so you don't have to know the answer. And also people who are interested in marine biology, the sea, etc. There's a zoo or aquarium that you can see virtually with this link as well. And of course, you can go to the zoo.
You can.
Or to the aquarium and just experience. Sometimes just do a nature walk, do a Google around leaves and why they matter. And so there's a lot that we can do. So some of the links that we send in the chat will help people get them started to start looking at, what is of interest to your child. And if they don't know, you can just experience it with them until they sort of find something that is of interest to them.
And just to pull the car over very briefly to say that if you are in the DC area, the museums in DC are free. There are some exceptions, but the Natural History Museum, the Air and Space Museum, all of those are free to go into. It's one of the luxuries that we have being residents of the DMV. So you can 100% do that. And, we have 100% come to the Crossroads. And this is the point in the show where we bring all of these things together. So we've touched on a few things. I'm going to bring in another piece in just a moment, but from going back to your origin story, being from the Crooked Islands, you are and understand firsthand the impact that a lot of this climate change is having. You understand that by being on an island where you are unfortunately exposed to a lot of the pollution from cruise ships, a lot of the rising sea levels, just the more the harshness of the hurricanes. Like there's so many different things that are having overfishing, just so many different aspects are having an impact on from your perspective, from your home. And that's a lot of folks who are from other islands in the Caribbean or just other islands, period, also are aware of this too. You talked about the exposure, and that's something that my mother said to me growing up. She said, the only thing that white people have over us is exposure. And that's what she prided herself on, making certain that I had as much exposure to different types of things as I could. And we've also talked about parents, their possible feeling of intimidation of not having the knowledge of STEM themselves or science or math or any of those things, and being a little concerned about how they're going to be able to support their children. Right. And the other piece that we have to bring into this as well is the fact that, we're talking about communities that are over-policed, that are negatively impacted by the school to prison pipeline. And these kids may not get exposed to STEM first, the way that they may be exposed to other negative aspects in their communities, the lack of access to adequate food, the lack of appropriate structure of their housing, painting or lead pipes, or there's so many different things that are hindrances and are barriers to our youth getting what they need. And with these resources, and internet too, because not everybody has high-speed internet.
That's right. Not everybody has it. Not everybody.
So there's,
yeah.
There's so many different things that, we've brought into this conversation. And, what I want to go back to is, why do you feel, or what do you feel is the real meat of the intersection between STEM and environmental justice?
So I think I want to mention something that I haven't mentioned, but I think it's critical. My mother used to say, the mind of a man or a woman makes a man or a woman. And so what that means is how you see yourself is the greatest determinant of your success. And why is that really important? It's important because sometimes when I talk to young people, I can tell they don't think they're smart enough. They don't think they're good enough. And they're missing this key element, which is they don't understand that they came from greatness. And so I think that the work that we have to do as a community, as parents, as educators, is we have got to know our history. I think we owe that to all groups, owe that to their ancestors themselves and their children. And I find myself now going back to and reminding people that you need to understand that even though we don't teach enough about the contributions of innovators and technologists that are African Americans in American history, and in fact, we're going in the complete wrong direction in terms of making sure that the nation and our children really understand what African Americans have gone through, but also what they've led and contributed to in terms of science and technology. And so I don't think you just start there. I mean, it covers history. We not only some of the people you've pointed to, Rashida, that are making contributions now, but we have great contributions from other people that are still, like Dr. Shirley Jackson, who's the president of Rensselaer Polytech Institute. We have, that's now. If you go back and look at our history, and the history of Timbuktu, people ought to know and understand that that's a place where we were teaching 25,000 students in the 12th century. And we have over 700,000 manuscripts that encompass science and engineering and art. There's so many gaps in our knowledge and understanding, but those gaps need to get filled, and we need to get serious about them, because parents should know and understand, and they should teach their children, not depend on the school system to do it. We still have that fight, but this is what we have to do, because kids need to know that we came from greatness, that this is not the first time that we're going to create some major solution. We've done it over and over and over again from the beginning of time. And it starts with understanding African history and our contribution. So I think that is really major. So I think the work that has to get done is the history, understanding, not all of it, but we've put something in the chat where you can go and look at a summary of what I consider to be one of the best summaries that I've seen. It was actually was given by the former NIST director. And yeah, Dr. James Turner in 2008. It's just a wonderful wrap up of our contributions, highlights over time. Mm-hmm. So I think historically we need to do that. I think that we need to get our kids involved in projects that are personal, and call them personal projects, things that matter to them. You know, I have talked to administrators about I'll say this. I gave a talk to Charles Flower High School, which is in my neighborhood in Prince George County. So Charles Flower has a wonderful engineering program run by Ms. Victoria Lee. And I think it has 300 students. But at the end of my talk, I always want people to own and claim, you know, and envision themselves as the next group of scientists and technologists. And so I always ask them, like, what bothers you and what are you going to fix? And I remember one student standing up saying that his mother has lupus, and she got lupus as a result of his birth. And so he said his contribution is going to be to eradicate lupus. And I love that. That's something that's personal, that matters to him. And so you've got to help students explore what's out there and what matters to them, and then encourage them on this journey. It's not something you just stop. You have to continue to make sure, that they are associated with groups of other kids that are doing some of the same things. I think that's really critical. I think in research, we always call these groups cohorts, but they're really just people doing the same things we're doing. And so I think that's really important. I think teachers need to find ways, and people that are developing STEM solutions, to pull in parents more, give them activities, give them things to do, because they're the teachers once you're not in the classroom and they go home. as many administrators have said to me, you're talking to these kids, they're excited right now, but when they get home to their parents who have no knowledge and don't understand the importance, it's going to lose some of the impact that you've had today. So I think in my wrap up, those are the kinds of things that I think we need to be focused on. And I think lastly, that there has to be more partnerships like the one Volt Utility has with HBCUs, because, how do we really expand this whole experience and to get more kids into the pipeline? Because there's still a drop off after people they enter in as freshmen and sophomore. There's still a thinning out of the pipeline where it's just hard and people drop off. So that's why cohorts are important, resources in universities, making sure people are using them. But also these partnerships really show students what they can be and what they can become, because they see other people that look like them and they have people that demonstrate that they believe in them. So I think there's still some work there that we can do to increase the pipeline and I like what you're doing in terms of making these issues more visible, because we have the means now to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So,
and as we're coming to the close of the show, are there any final remarks or any kind of anything you want to close out with? And also you have to give folks, if you feel like it, how they can find you and keep up with what you're doing.
So I will say to you, I think STEM has made a difference in my life. It has given me choices to choose whether I was a professor, an engineer in manufacturing, an entrepreneur. It's a wonderful base and foundation for anything I wanted to be. I've explored the world. I've traveled. I've had the means to live the lifestyle that excites me. It has also supported something I really believe in, which is empowerment. And so it has just allowed me to do the kinds of things that I imagine and dream about. And also, I've just had a lot of fun. Sometimes people never mention that. I think there's still a little, people still think about people in STEM as very nerdy,
pocket protector,
unattractive, but a lot of accomplished people that are happy doing great things, have built wealth and have made major contributions to society, I think, through STEM careers. And so I just want to encourage parents that this is, if you look at my story and my parents, and I'm no different than many people that came from humble beginnings, but I've had people that believed in me, encouraged me, got access to resources, got with the teachers, just really poured into me. So I would close by saying that. And in addition to some of the information that Rashida, we're providing in the chat, folks can always find my articles at the signet.com link that we have there. And also you can always locate me on LinkedIn. I'm right there. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And thank you for sharing all this knowledge. I just have one quick shout out, and that two shout outs, actually, I lied. So the first shout out is to Seema Thomas, who can't be on this show for any longer, Rob, for some reasons we will not delve into. But she is the person responsible for bringing us together.
Yes.
And that's just who she's been. She's had a major impact on this show. So I have wanted to give her, because she was one of my guest in resident for a little while. So I just wanted to give her a quick shout out. And also for HBCU students, a friend of mine, Lavinia Jones, has a fellowship program through her organization, Consciously Funded. So I'll put a link in the chat. Please apply. It's a really amazing program. She's been working really diligently on it. So just wanted to say those things. And Dr. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you all for listening. And we will see you all again at the Crossroads.
And thank you.